Hello and welcome to Rising. I'm Amber Duke here with Nomiki Konst. Great to have you back at the desk.
Thank you.
Absolutely. 2 for 2. All right. Donald Trump says he wants to debate Kamala Harris, not just once, but 3 times between now and November. Speaking from Mar-a-Lago Thursday, the GOP nominee said he has agreed to debate Harris on September 4th on Fox News, again on September 10th on NBC, and then again September 25th on ABC. Here's a snippet from his presser Thursday afternoon. Let's watch.
The other side has to agree to the terms. They may or may not agree. I don't know if they're going to agree. She hasn't done an interview. She can't do an interview. She's barely competent, and she can't do an interview. But I look forward to the debates because I think we have to set the record straight.
Harris responded. Take a look.
I'm glad that he's finally agreed to a debate on September 10th. I'm looking forward to it, and hope he shows up.
Are you open to more debates?
I am happy to have that conversation about an additional debate or after.
Meanwhile, polling on the state of the race is all over the place. Thursday, a new Marquette University Law School survey shows that Harris is leading Trump by 6 points, 53% to 47% among likely voters nationwide. It also confirms that Harris maintains the lead when an independent candidate, say RFK Jr., is introduced. With the outsider, she still leads Trump with 47% support compared to his 41% and 9% going to RFK Jr. Like the Marquette poll, NPR's PBS News Marist released their own poll, also showing Harris polling ahead of Trump with 51% support to 48%. The poll also revealed that she's doing better among independent voters, 53 to 44% respectively. A CBS News YouGov poll released a poll earlier this month, also showing Harris topping Trump. But the Trump campaign quickly jumped on this, pointing to how sampling was manipulated, skewing the poll of respondents, therefore skewing the results. In an internal memo made public, the Trump team wrote the poll was, quote, entirely the result of a methodological decision allowing ideology to change significantly while maintaining weights on age, partisanship, and race to make the survey appear not to have been manipulated. Without this manipulation, President Trump would be maintaining a 51 to 49 lead in their August 4th survey.
But other polling shows that Trump is the one in the lead. For example, a CNBC survey reveals he is ahead of the VP by 2 percentage points, which is the same as when pitted up against Biden when he was at the top of the Democratic ticket. According to the latest Rasmussen poll, Trump tops Harris with 49 to 44%, with 4% supporting other candidates. Despite the inconsistencies, pollster Frank Luntz is leaning Harris, posting, quote, if the election were held today, I actually believe Kamala Harris would beat Donald Trump. That's how much things have changed over the past 2 weeks. So this seems like more like a lesson in the danger of looking too much at any singular poll than anything else. I think when you go across the evidence that we have right now, the bottom line is this is a tight race.
Right.
But I think what is really underscoring all of this is that we're basically back to where we were before that Trump-Biden debate in June, where we saw sort of a back and forth of a 2-point or 3-point lead, usually within the margin of error. I think all of these polls that we're looking at here between CNBC, Rasmussen, NPR, and CBS are all within the margin of error. It's just close.
Yeah, it's close. I mean, within the margin of error, plus or minus 1 or 2 points in favor of mostly Harris. I think what also is significant and what is unusual in Trump's response, the campaign's response, is it seems as if they're relying heavily on ideological factors, which are very unpredictable in polling. And if you look at polling experts like Soltis Anderson, who's in the New York Times, she explained that this is something that pollsters across the board do not rely on because, you know, you can tweak with them a little bit. They try to do their best. Polling is imperfect, especially since people have pulled away from their home phones and younger generations are harder to poll. But there's an excitement shift. I mean, this is absolutely like what is playing the biggest factor here is that as soon as Kamala Harris got in the race, and the polling hasn't even reflected Tim Walz entering the race yet, but as soon as Kamala Harris entered the race, excitement went up. And there was an excitement issue where people are not interested in taking part in the election. Independents like RFK Jr. were doing a little bit more strongly before Kamala Harris jumped in. And it seems as if the Trump campaign doesn't want to acknowledge that. And they're just like everything else, they think it's rigged. Polling is flawed. We know that. Instead of complaining about polling, they should be, going out there and getting their voters excited.
Right, message discipline. I completely agree. And I think it's fair to say that the excitement has changed pretty significantly with the Democratic Party. I mean, it seems kind of obvious, right? You have this guy who has a lot of questions surrounding his ability to make it through a second term, a lot of division within the Democratic Party about whether or not to force him out. And then you get the party to rally behind his vice president as the new nominee. Naturally, people are going to be more excited to vote for her than they were to vote for Joe Biden. Also considering the fact that there was a lot of consternation with Joe Biden's Israel policy. According to the CNBC poll, 54% of Kamala Harris voters say that their vote is a vote for her rather than against Trump. With Biden, it was only 31% of his voters who said the same thing. The line that's coming out of, I would say, right-leaning data firms and polling firms is that there's obviously notable energy, but there's not evidence that the fundamentals of the race have been reset. And I think we're going to see things start to move in one or the other direction once the Democratic convention goes by and Harris releases whatever her platform is going to be after they had this debate on September 10th at ABC, which there was like some confusion over when exactly the debate was taking place and where, but it's apparently going to be September 10th on ABC. And then I think, Harris has also said that she's going to have finally a sit-down media interview by the end of the month, and that could change things too.
Absolutely. And I think it only works in favor of Democrats at this point. We have the convention coming up. There's usually, although it didn't happen with RNC, there's usually a bump in polling after a convention. And so I think we're going to see the best and brightest, the next generation of Democrats come forward. We're going to see a diverse coalition on stage of different types of Democrats. We may even see some Never Trump Republicans. I mean, my ideal, and I don't know if this will ever happen, is if Mike Pence introduces our vice presidential nominee, Tim Walz.
His approval rating's not great.
But it makes a point. It makes a point that, this is a man who we may not agree with ideologically. He's much more conservative when it comes to cultural issues, but he is a man who does believe in democracy and was not willing to stand in the way of democracy for Donald Trump's, own gains. So I think there's a lot to happen here, and it's only going to get better for Democrats. Enthusiasm is everything. That is really what makes or breaks elections. That's how Donald Trump won. Even the polls said he was not going to win mostly in 2016, but he had the enthusiasm. We cannot deny that. I was on the Bernie Sanders team in 2016. We were complaining about this to the Hillary team, that they needed to get the base excited. When I was covering the election in 2016 in Pennsylvania on Election Day, the lines were not out the door like they were in 2008 and 2012 for Barack Obama. I think that's going to be different this time around. I think that actually went into Kamala Harris's choice of not choosing Shapiro. I don't think she necessarily needed Governor Shapiro, to win Pennsylvania. I think that she can do it on her own. I think they're really going to be focusing on swing voters, those independent voters who are now leaning towards Kamala Harris. And of course, the Midwestern white male voters, the Tim Walz dads.
and that's where I think she's going to have a problem, is with this move to the middle that she's trying to pull off, and where I don't think a debate and a sit-down media interview are in the Democrats' favor, because she still has not explained how she has changed so much from 2019 when she was running in the Democratic primary to where she is today. And I think if she doesn't provide a sufficient enough explanation for that, or tries to gloss over it, that is a very helpful attack line for the Trump campaign and for the Republicans. Is, okay, you said you were this massive progressive, now you're running as a moderate and are trying to advance that idea with, this white Midwestern dad who conveniently has pretty much all of the same policies that you espoused in 2019. Where is the disconnect here? And are you going to govern more as a progressive if you were to win an election, or is this moderate shift truly who you are now?
I don't even think it's a question of becoming a moderate. I think she and Tim Walz have policies in the past, and hopefully today with the new platform, that are economic, populist, progressive policies. And that bleeds over, as Bernie Sanders showed in his messaging and his platform, that bleeds over to independent voters, that bleeds over to even people who are socially conservative. They want their lives to be better. And so I think at the end of the day, it's really going to come down to who's going to make your life better.
I think you're right. All right, we're going to leave it there. We'll be back with more Rising after this.
What do tampons have to do with the presidential election? Apparently, a lot. Tampons in schools is the latest issue dividing some Americans, all because Kamala Harris's running mate, Governor Tim Walz, signed a bill last year ensuring free menstrual products in Minnesota public schools. While many on the left applauded the move, some on the right are up in arms, calling the governor, quote, Tampon Tim. It all seems like another way for the right to paint Walz as a radical far-left liberal, especially since the policy isn't out of the ordinary. In fact, there are similar policies in 28 other states and D.C.
The problem for conservatives is the bill's language, which requires menstrual products to be available to, quote, all menstruating students in restrooms regularly used by students in grades 4 to 12, according to a plan developed by the school, which includes boys' bathrooms. The popular X account, Libs of TikTok, resurfaced this video and said, quote, Tampon Tim spearheaded the weird initiative. Let's watch.
And really, at the end of the day, they're just weird, and they focus on weird issues that don't impact people's lives. Vote Dem-Govs.
Libs of TikTok then goes on to say, quote, the guy who wants tampons in boys' bathrooms, porn in schools, sex change surgeries for kids, ladders to help illegals invade our country, and stoked violent riots says Republicans are weird and focus on weird issues. Megyn Kelly reacted similarly on X, writing, quote, are you aware he forced fourth grade boys to have tampons in their school bathrooms? You're good with that? Totally norms?
Sorry, guys. The Atlantic's Jameel Hill, is it Jameel? I'm sorry about that. Jamel, I apologize. The Atlantic's Jamel Hill fired back, writing, quote, kinda hilarious seeing conservatives lose their shit over tampons and maxi pads being available in student restrooms when just a couple of weeks ago, so many of them were sticking a pad on their ear in solidarity with Trump. In another viral tweet, a user responded to Megyn Kelly, writing, quote, as a girl dad, I can tell you how many times I've dropped feminine hygiene products off at school because they were needed unexpectedly and not provided. Calling him Tampon Tim should be a badge of honor. Well, I mean, the internet had a lot of fun with this, and I feel like every single time the Republicans try to attack Tim Walz, or Kamala Harris in this case, it's just backfiring, and it's become a weapon. They're spending millions and millions of dollars on these attacks, and we are just flipping it like jujitsu in their faces. So thank you, Republicans, for putting all of this money into your messaging campaign for us.
I don't think anyone's spending millions of dollars on the Tampon Tim commentary. That seems to be an organic social media trend. But nonetheless, I fail to see how this is backfiring. I think it's objectively weird that he thinks that tampons need to be in boys' and men's bathrooms. This is a lack of common sense, I find, from the Minnesota governor.
I think just the opposite. I think if we are going to be supporting women and girls who are menstruating, and especially since this is a class issue too, they did a study in St. Louis, 33% of girls in schools did not have access to menstrual products. And sometimes, that has to do with, socioeconomic status, but it also has to do with that women and girls are getting their periods at an earlier age, and it's unexpected. This is much bigger. This is much bigger than the Republicans' game of making everything about gender roles. This is about, are we supporting women and girls in society when so many can't afford these, the tampon tax, they call it, the feminine goods tax. So many families can't afford to do so, and I think it's a great service. And it's available in 28 states. This isn't, a partisan issue. They have this program in Arizona, which is a right-wing state. They have this program all across the country, and it has not been something up for debate until now when Tim Walz has come forward saying, you know what, I'm a great ally, and I'm a dad, and I'm a girl dad, and I want to support girls across this country who may not have access to these goods.
No one objects to this program being available in girls' and women's bathrooms. They object to the fact that he felt it necessary to make it inclusive so that it's in boys' bathrooms when we know boys and men don't menstruate. That's why people are making fun of him for it, because it is illogical and frankly weird. I mean, as much as Tim Walz calls Republicans weird, he's the guy who actually on pretty much every single policy is completely out of step with the American public.
That's not true at all. He's passed more bipartisan legislation. I mean, he worked with the Republican legislature before it became Democratic and passed legislation, key legislation. When he was in Congress, he was a centrist. So, I know the Republicans want to paint him as this out-of-touch liberal, but these are common sense policies that help working class Americans.
It's not common sense to put tampons in boys' bathrooms.
It's gender-neutral bathrooms in many states. So gender neutral, I mean, you go into gender neutral bathrooms all the time.
Women can use it too, but if you're putting it exclusively in boys' bathrooms,
it's not exclusively in boys' bathrooms.
It says here that
so it's not in girls' bathrooms. It's just in boys' bathrooms.
It's in both, and I'm saying
that's not
it's
exclusive.
Stupid to have it in. It's what?
You said exclusively in boys' bathrooms.
No, I'm saying that they are in bathrooms that are exclusively for boys, in addition to being in the women's and gender neutral. I mean, it's just classic missing the point to say, oh, you guys don't want girls to have tampons. No, we think it's weird that you think boys need tampons. Like, that's just illogical. And this guy also has made his state a trans refuge for kids, children, to get sex changes and go on puberty blockers and hormone therapies, which there's not a single study to prove that this improves children's mental health. That's why the National Health Service in the UK stopped their programs and said that they're only allowed to use puberty blockers in clinical research settings because over the 5 years that they have been providing those services through the Tavistock Clinic, they have not had one single study back up the idea that these are helpful for kids. And in fact, in many cases, they're actively harmful.
Well, okay, you're going off on a tangent here because a refuge does not mean that they're calling in and paying for people's sex changes. This is not the situation. You still have to go through parental advisory. I mean, there has to be approval. You're making a comment about providing tampons and menstrual products to. By the way, if you're a brother, don't you think it would be nice as a brother to be supportive of a sister?
No, I think it would be weird.
I don't know why you guys care about this so much.
My brother tried to give me a tampon, I think it would.
Well, sometimes you're in a crisis, and sometimes, we've all been in those situations, especially during puberty.
Yeah, and we ask our girlfriends if they have one. I certainly wouldn't ask one of my guy friends. I'm sorry. I think
the fact that Republicans
my mind on that.
I think the fact that Republicans are obsessing over this just means that they're grasping for anything at this point. This is a ridiculous.
I don't think anyone's obsessing over it. I think that we made a joke and a meme, and then y'all freaked out and were like, "Oh my God, you don't want women to have tampons," as if that's what the argument's about.
It is.
It's not. I mean, I'm telling you what it is, and you're just like rejecting it to my face, which is interesting.
I think fundamentally Republicans don't want to pay for services, and they will use any sort of argument to not pay for services like this service, which really does support women and girls across the state.
But you said
28
it yourself.
states.
Exactly. You said it yourself. This is available in 28 states for women and girls. In Minnesota, it's also available in boys' bathrooms, and we're only criticizing the state where it's available in boys' bathrooms.
That's not true. In several states, they have gender-neutral bathrooms, and it's just not true. I think we have to look at the stats here, and we're getting wrapped up in whether or not boys should have access to supporting girls with their menstrual products when, again, at the end of the day, it's really just code for Republicans don't want to pay for services.
That's just a lie. I mean, you can say that as much as you want, but it is objectively just a lie. I mean,
so would you pay for this? Are you
I just said 6 times that I would. And by the way, it's Trump that actually wants to get rid of taxes on Social Security. It's Trump that wants to get rid of
Social Security altogether.
Well, I mean, why did you just make stuff up on the
show? It's a deregulation.
He said he wants to get rid of taxes on Social Security, and now you're saying he wants to get rid of Social Security. You can't just say things that he's never said.
Security.
He's never said that. J.D. Vance has never said that. It is literally in their platform that they will never cut Social Security. He said it yesterday in a press conference. If you want to come on here and talk about the policies of candidates that they have actually expressed, that's fine. But don't just make up things because it sounds good for your political messaging.
Well, it's not about political messaging. It's that the Republican track record has been to cut programs, to advocate for cutting for programs.
Okay, but don't
you can say something in a campaign, but the way that you act is completely different.
Did he cut Social Security in his first term? Because guess what? We have 4 years of evidence for what Trump would do.
He did not cut Social Security, but that is partly because there was so much pushback.
Oh my gosh. This is ridiculous.
Okay, well then tell me how the libertarian arm of the Republican Party, which
Trump's
is
not
helping,
part of the libertarian arm. That's the whole
I didn't
point.
say that, but they're affecting the libertarian arm. Peter Thiel is a libertarian. Peter Thiel is bankrolling J.D. Vance right now. You're telling me that Peter Thiel is not influencing the policies of the Republican National Convention right now? The Republican National Committee?
No, it's not, because the new platform that just came out at the convention was not libertarian at all. In fact, it rejected a lot of the reforms that Project 2025, which is another thing y'all are so obsessed with, about reforming Social Security. They said no to that, point blank.
Because they want to win an election.
No, because J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are economic populists, and in 2015, they changed the entire direction of the Republican Party away from the libertarian, economic deregulation obsessed Republican Party. That's why they were able to win, and that's why the establishment hates him so much in the Republican Party.
So why is Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, they're some of the biggest backers of the Republican Party right now, and they are an example of a libertarian's dream. So, I mean, it's one thing to put something in a platform, and let's be real about politics. We know that these platforms are passed. I've been on a platform committee for the DNC. It does not mean that the candidates follow the platform. Sorry to burst your bubble, guys. It's a lot of time to put those platforms together, but they're basically a piece of paper and a press conference.
I'm just curious, what would be enough for you to prove that Trump's not going to cut Social Security? It was in his 2015 platform. He had 4 years in office where he didn't do it, and you're like, oh, no, well, it's just because there was political pressure not to.
I think if he can show evidence that he is not going to be deregulating this country. I mean, maybe he's not going to cut it on day one or campaign on it because it's incredibly unpopular. But I have no doubt that if Donald Trump were to be elected tomorrow again, he would be putting Social Security and every other government program on the chopping block, including providing menstrual products to women and girls who cannot afford so.
Okay, I'm sure that's what people are voting on. We're going to have to leave it there. We'll be back with more after this. Former President Donald Trump stepped into the limelight yesterday and gave a rambling 1-hour press conference from Mar-a-Lago. He went on about many topics. In fact, hashtag Trump meltdown is trending. Let's watch.
She's a radical left person at a level that nobody's seen. She picked a radical left man that is, he's got things done that he has positions that are just not, it's not even possible to believe that they exist. He's going for things that nobody's ever even heard of. Heavy into the transgender world, heavy into lots of different worlds.
Then there was this rant about, quote, asylum, which the Lincoln Project seized on.
Why is it that millions of people were allowed to come into our country from prisons, from jails, from mental institutions, insane asylums, even insane asylums? It's a mental institution on steroids. That's what it is. When you see the people that are coming into these are institutions that are being emptied out, not in South America, all over the world, including South America, all over the world.
And last but certainly not least, the former president compared himself to MLK.
If you look at Martin Luther King, when he did his speech, his great speech, and you look at ours, same real estate, same everything, same number of people, if not, we had more. And they said he had 1 million people, but I had 25,000 people. But when you look at the exact same picture, and everything's the same because it was the fountains, the whole thing, all the way back to from Lincoln to Washington, and you look at it, and you look at the picture of his crowd, my crowd, we actually had more people. They said I had 25,000 and he had 1 million people. And I'm okay with it because I liked Dr. Martin Luther King.
Here was the reaction from Meghan McCain on X. She posted, Vice President Kamala Harris is going to win. So I will start by saying that I do think the Trump campaign needs to have better message discipline. All of the talk about her race and whether she identifies more as Indian or Black was a distraction from the fact that when you look at polls, including the ones that show Kamala Harris up by 1 or 2 percentage points, Trump wins on the issues, especially the top issues for voters, immigration and economy. The only one that Kamala Harris typically leads on is abortion. He also is ahead in the swing states. So just stick to the fundamentals, stick to the basics. And we don't need to be doing the hour-long sort of meandering press conferences, especially when you have a debate coming up. All of these qualms about her record or how you feel the state of the country is can be easily handled in a debate or even in just a more controlled setting. This seems like maybe an attempt for them to kind of dampen the enthusiasm that's been coming out of the Democratic Party for Kamala, and I'm not sure that it worked in his favor.
I completely agree. I think Donald Trump is used to the old adage from 2016. The campaign had that sign in the campaign offices, let Trump be Trump. But when you let Trump be Trump without Steve Bannon and without these strategists that are in prison or have been completely pushed out for different reasons, Donald Trump, left to his own devices, is an egomaniacal young child who can't stand the fact that Kamala Harris now has this enthusiasm and is dominating the press cycles, and so he has to go up there. I mean, he gives speeches, hour-long speeches, 2-hour-long speeches. This press conference was not just long and meandering, but he couldn't keep his thoughts together, and when he did, it was really unhinged. And I think, I don't know if it's because he doesn't have a strong team around him anymore. I don't know if it's because they're just letting him do or say whatever he wants to do. I don't know if it's because Eric Trump is advising him now. But you're right. If he sticks to the basics, he's going to have a much better path to winning. But again, that could change when the Harris-Walz ticket comes out with their platform and starts to talk more definitively about immigration and the economy, because I do think that we have a winning ticket when it comes to those issues. But that should be played out on the debate stage. That should be played out in the campaign. Letting Trump do what he's doing right now, not a winning strategy. I'm going to guess Steve Bannon wouldn't support this one.
The thing with Trump and his long press conferences or even rallies, what I think is interesting is that the tone of this one was very different than what you see at a Trump rally.
Right.
The Trump rallies are very exciting. He's quite funny. He can be very charming at them. And this one was simultaneously long, but also almost boring, even when he was talking about things that would sort of like whip up his political opponents. But I just didn't love it.
And there is something to be said about feeding off of a crowd. He was being interviewed, I believe, yesterday also about the crowd sizes, and he'd said, they're lying about Kamala Harris's crowd sizes. You didn't talk about my crowd size last week, which is true. He did have a decent-sized crowd last week, but the one that, most recently was not that large. This is what hits him. He gets so defensive about how many people adore him and how they're praising him online and how they're attacking him. But if you don't do that in conjunction with talking about the issues, you could let Trump do that a little bit and get away with it and keep the base excited, but he has to talk about the issues. He has to expand the base. And this, to me, seems like the campaign is not focusing on expanding the base, expanding into different demographics. Doubling down with J.D. Vance is a prime example of this. I don't think any sophisticated political strategist would be advising him to do this. You can't just focus on Trump's most loyal audience. You have to go out there and win votes. You have to talk about issues that appeal to middle American voters, on the fence independent voters, folks who might not be voting on abortion. I think that's going to be the critical issue, by the way, and I'm glad you mentioned it. He has to go outside of what his comfort zone is. And I don't know who's pushing back. Do you know who's advising Donald Trump right now?
Well, his campaign managers are Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles, but I obviously am not in there. I don't know who decided to actually do this press conference. But I will say, on the J.D. Vance question, there's been a lot of reports claiming that Trump is unhappy with J.D. Vance, that he wants to get rid of him. I don't think we should put any stock into those. From what I hear, Trump is quite happy with Vance. He's doing a really great job fundraising for the campaign. He had this really viral moment earlier this week where he, showed up in front of Air Force Two. He says, "Hey, that's going to be my plane, and I'm here taking questions from the media. Where is the Democratic nominee doing the same?" And he kind of forced her hand, because then the next day she does go to the press scrum and she takes 3 or 4 questions before jetting off to her next campaign event, and then announces that she's going to do a sit-down media interview by the end of the month. I think that was one of the most effective bright spots for the Trump campaign, basically since the Democrats swapped out their candidate.
But be careful what you ask for, because she appeared in front of the press and did a great job. And
well, she took like 3 questions about Trump where she said, yeah, he sucks, and then walked away.
those are the questions that were asked. I mean, that was stalkery. Let's be real. It sounded, on our side, it appeared very desperate. It appeared stalkery.
How is it stalkery that their planes happen to be at the same airport?
He walked over to her plane and said, that's going to be my plane someday. And
he walked over to the press that was staged.
In front of the plane with Kamala Harris, not his plane. That's how desperate it looked. He wants attention so bad that he has to run over to the other side to try to get the press's attention because that press didn't show up for his plane. I mean, he has opportunities. He could have done a press conference. Instead, he tried to seize in on a woman's moment. On the vice president's moment.
Gosh.
Well, that's true.
Are we making it a misogyny thing now?
I think it is misogynistic, just like it was when Donald Trump stalked Hillary Clinton on the debate stage. That was creepy. It doesn't play well to women, and they need women to win.
Okay, I mean, the idea that he, in this political strategy moment of pointing out how she hasn't talked to the press, he's doing it because he's a woman, I think is pretty tired and absurd, and there's no evidence for it. But I don't think it looked desperate at all. I think it was a smart way to turn the fact that she has avoided the media around on her. And I don't buy the idea that she's going to magically cement her support when she talks to the press or when she does the debate. We know historically that she's actually been quite bad when she's off of a teleprompter.
She's been great in debates, though. I mean,
how do you figure?
In the Democratic primary, I mean, she had one of the most viral moments in the Democratic primary.
Yeah, calling the guy that she ended up.
Fair enough. I agree, but it was a good debate performance.
And then the immediate debate after that, she had her campaign destroyed by Tulsi Gabbard, who was polling at 1% on her record as San Francisco DA and California AG.
Let's talk about Tulsi Gabbard's record. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard, she basically is a correspondent for Vladimir Putin at this point. So,
Okay, let's not call people Russian stooges or whatever because they are anti-interventionists.
Oh, because she went there and met with him. It's fair. Okay.
So meeting with Putin makes you someone who is doing his agenda?
I think at this phase, when you have a friendly meeting and you're not a Congress member and you're a correspondent on Fox News and you're echoing all the talking points and there are Russian bots propping you up, yeah, I do think it's pretty bizarre that she is becoming a weapon for somebody else. Rather, if she was a Democrat running in the Democratic primary, then maybe talk about Democratic policies. Instead, she was using the Democratic Party as a primary as a weapon to take on other Democrats and to weaken the Democratic primary.
She was a Democrat long before she ran for president in that primary, but I think even if
she left the party.
Yes, after she ran for president, but I think what's interesting about that talking point that Tulsi Gabbard is this, she's a Russia Putin apologist because she doesn't want our working class kids going off to sent to die in a war for a foreign country.
That's not why I said
that. Even if you believe that she's not a good politician or that she has policies that you disagree with, isn't that all the more embarrassing then for Kamala Harris that she got so handily defeated by her on the debate stage?
I think she attacked her, and it was a good attack line. But again, we're 4 years later. Kamala Harris is the vice presidential nominee. She's going to be prepared for a debate with Donald Trump. Let's focus on Donald Trump and Kamala Harris.
Yeah, I hope you're right, but we're going to see. I don't think that her history in debates is a positive one. You think it is. But the good news is that on September 10th, we'll be able to see for ourselves.
Can't wait.
All right. More Rising after this. Newly released body cam video shows the moment police officers saw former President Trump's shooter right before the assassination attempt. Let's watch. It's been nearly a month since the assassination attempt at Trump's rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. Both the former Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle and the acting director Ronald Rowe have testified before lawmakers. But there are still many questions that remain about the extent of law enforcement's failures that day as investigations continue. The new footage shows how 5 officers, for about 2.5 minutes, gathered around the warehouse where the gunman was. It establishes that officers had determined the gunman's location, frantically tried to find a way to get on the roof, and determined he was armed. YouTuber and political commentator Benny Johnson traveled to the site of the assassination attempt and teamed up with Republican Representative Corey Mills to dig deeper into what happened. Let's watch.
How was Crooks allowed to get so close to the president in the first place? How was he allowed to fire 8 shots? We investigated his sniper nest to find out. The exact location where Crooks fired his weapon is easy to find because once you are on the rooftop, it is still stained with his blood.
Yes, this is it right here.
This is it right here?
You can see the blood trail that comes down.
Got it. Got it. So they're right where Trump was.
Right.
They're where Trump was right there.
As your basic training boot camp soldier, that they make twice this distance shot to pass boot camp with iron sights, not with a red dot, not with a scope, with any magnification or any type of a, red dot sight. It's that much easier of a shot.
Johnson was also joined by Republican Representative Eli Crane, who broke down why one sniper's nest was left empty during the shooting.
SWAT sniper team was stationed on the 2nd floor of the AGR building with perfect overwatch of the roof. The snipers in this location could have and should have easily been able to engage Crooks before he ever came close to scope sight of Trump. The acting director of the Secret Service says he does not know what happened in this location, but we do.
Who was stationed up there? And did they see the shooter? Why weren't they engaging?
Once there was a suspicious individual reported, one of them came down, left the room that they were conducting overwatch in, went down to, I think, walk around the perimeter, see if he could find him. Tried to come back in the building. The key card wasn't working, and so he called the other guy that was up in the room. The other guy left his post to come down to let him in. We're being told that that's when the shots were taken.
So it's just the worst possible timing for a local SWAT team or sniper team.
So,
Independent journalist Richie McGinnis, who helped shoot that documentary, also wondered why snipers weren't better positioned. Let's take a look.
All right, I got a quick question for you guys. If that's where the sniper was, and that's the water tower up there, then why wasn't the Secret Service up there? Because it's pretty easy to see what's down here from up there. So I'm just asking questions here, if anybody could help me out. Thanks, really appreciate it. This is where Trumpo was. Hold on one sec. He's right over here. That's it. 150 yards.
Richie joins us now to discuss it all. Richie, great to see you, and thank you so much for actually going to the site and getting this footage. It seems like, it's only been a month since this happened, and a lot of people have already forgotten about it. I don't think there's any way to say this other than this was a massive security failure, and I guess the remaining question now is, was it intentional or just pure incompetence?
Yeah, absolutely. When you're actually there and you see the security perimeter that was set up and how close and how easy it was for anybody who was not secure, didn't go through a magnetometer or anything like that, to just walk up to that chain link fence that you saw in my video. They were within 100 yards of where Trump was speaking, within direct line of sight, and they could have brought, people brought coolers for beers, but anybody could have brought anything in that cooler. And Crooks was actually right behind them on that barn. And that newly released body cam footage, the question that I'm asking, which is the question that the officer asked in that footage, is I asked them to secure this roof back on Tuesday, and the shooting happened on Saturday. So if the local PD were raising these questions, 5 days ahead of time, why is it that nobody was looking down on that roof at that particular moment when Trump was speaking? Right,
and we've also heard reports that the Secret Service apparently skipped a briefing with the local law enforcement officials they had there prior to the rally. So there was a complete communication breakdown, it seems, between the Secret Service and then the individuals who knew the area and were familiar with the security perimeter. I don't know how that even happens.
Absolutely, and there was also a panel that was done with the local police department, and they stated that they communicated these things with Secret Service, and Secret Service skipped a briefing prior to the speech. So you have to ask yourself the question of, is this just negligence? Does animus towards Trump, because obviously Mayorkas is the one, a Joe Biden appointee is the one who's overseeing the security. Why exactly were all of these things overlooked? And I mean, is it just gross negligence, or does that animus play into it at all?
Yeah, I think that is really a key question here. And we've seen that the Secret Service Director, Kimberly Cheadle, stepped down from her position after immense political pressure. But Ronald Rowe is now taken over, and he was also, tangentially in charge of this security detail.
Yeah, and it was obvious during the hearing that he was not filled in on a bunch of key details, like why was there no one in that window that directly overlooks that roof? And the question that I asked in that video, that water tower, not only does it overlook the particular building where Crooks was stationed and where he fired from, but also it has a line of sight of basically the entire area. So, I mean, if I were 15 years old playing paintball, I would be able to secure a better perimeter than was secured around the former president of the United States. And I have zero background in anything other than Call of Duty and playing airsoft and paintball. So,
well, it all seems pretty common sense if you just take a look at the videos that you took from that location. As you were walking through with these congressmen and Benny Johnson, what was the most surprising thing that you learned as you're going through the failures that day?
Well, actually, so you can see me. I was the one standing where Trump was on stage. So as I was standing there and looking out to Benny, out on the roof where Crooks was in the exact position, I mean, with my naked eye, I could see them walking around, and then when he laid down, I could actually even still see him. And we were on the phone, can you see me now? Can you see me now? Yeah, I can see you. And so even with the naked eye from where Trump was standing, you could see somebody on that roof, whether they were in the prone position or not. And obviously, the Secret Service claimed that roof was too sloped.
Right.
I actually went up on the roof where the Secret Service snipers that everybody saw on that red barn. That roof is much more sloped than the one that Crooks was on. So I don't know where that answer came from, but anybody who was even within 100 yards of those two roofs could have determined that, that's not true.
I think that was probably one of the answers that helped dig Cheadle's grave, for lack of a better term. But from that vantage point of being where Trump was standing on the stage and being able to see them moving around on the roof, whether they're laying down or not, it begs the question, I think, of why he wasn't pulled from the stage as soon as this guy was spotted. And yet there was, a 15-minute period where he was allowed to run around on this roof with no one thinking to either confront him or at the very least make sure that Trump was pulled to safety.
I mean, what's the point in having local police there to help secure the area if they're not on any kind of similar communications channel? Because apparently they weren't, because they were running around for minutes before he fired those shots, and they were surrounding that building, and the Secret Service, whether or not they had eyes on him, and they were wondering whether or not, this is an actual threat. I mean, he had an AR-15, which is it's not like he had a small weapon. So just a lot of different breakdowns, and after actually walking across the site, I have way more questions than I do answers. Let's just leave it at that.
Sure, and because you have a background in video production, there are a couple of other questions I want to get at, one of which is there's been this conspiracy theory floating around that what actually hit Trump's ear was a piece of teleprompter that was struck by the bullet. You worked with a lot of teleprompters in your day. Do you think it is at all possible that it was a piece of glass and not a bullet that hit Trump?
Well, I've worked with a lot of teleprompters, and I've also seen what an AR-15 can do at close range in Kenosha. And I can tell you right now, when the shooting happened, I obviously jumped onto Twitter to try to gather as much information as I could, and that conspiracy theory was instantly debunked with the simple photograph of Trump on the ground after the shooting with both teleprompters fully intact. So I don't know too much about AR-15s, but I know enough that if you shoot something that's glass with an AR-15, it's probably not going to remain intact.
Right, and I'm glad you brought up Kenosha because that was where I wanted to go next, because for our viewers who don't know, you were on the ground during the riots in the summer of 2020 and unfortunately played a more personal role with one of the individuals who was killed that day by Kyle Rittenhouse. But you mentioned to me in one of our other conversations that you think that politics could have played a role in the lack of National Guard support for a few days in both Minnesota and then in Wisconsin. Can you talk a little bit more about what the timeline was like there and how it might compare to what we're seeing now with this assassination attempt?
Yeah, it was the same story in all the different protest zones we traveled to, from Portland, Seattle, Kenosha. You know, basically you have a Democratic governor or a Democratic mayor in these cities, and they say, Trump, you're not going to bring in your feds. We're not going to let you, determine how we run things in this city. And as a result, the police were completely overwhelmed. On that night in Kenosha, there were National Guard, but they were not in a large number, and all they did was protect the courthouse while the rest of the city was literally burned. And the second question I have after experiencing what happened in Kenosha is, during the moment of the shooting, there was a drone in the air directly above where the shooting took place, and there was also a Cessna, an FBI Cessna plane with infrared cameras filming the riots that were going on, the buildings burning down below. And if they had aerial surveillance over a riot in Kenosha, then why is it that the request for aerial surveillance over the site where Trump was speaking was rejected? I mean, I flew multiple drones over burning cars and over all these different protest zones, and I know how easy it is to put a drone up in the air. So the question is, why is it that they weren't allowed to just, power up a drone and put it over while Trump was speaking?
Right, especially since there were some locals there who even offered their own services to make that happen. I think you're right. There are a lot more questions than answers based on recent history. I'm not confident that we're going to get those answers, unfortunately, but thanks to you and to Benny and to all of the other independent journalists who are trying to make sure we get as informed about this as possible. Richie McGinnis, thanks so much for joining us here on Rising.
Thanks for having me.
In a huge victory for Elon Musk, the Global Alliance for Responsible Media is discontinuing after Musk's ex accused the group of boycotting the platform. The Global Alliance for Responsible Media, known as GARM, is a nonprofit group of advertisers led by the World Federation of Advertisers. GARM aims to help brands from having harmful or illegal content appear alongside ads. The lawsuit that X filed claimed GARM violated antitrust laws by coordinating with brands to persuade them not to spend money on X. The World Federation of Advertisers denied GARM's work violated antitrust laws. Should I do that again? Can you slow it down just a little bit? Thank you. The World Federation of Advertisers denied GARM's work violated antitrust laws, but said GARM did not have the financial resources to continue its operations while fighting X in court. In an email first obtained by Business Insider, the CEO of the World Federation of Advertisers said, quote, "This decision was not made lightly, but GARM is a non-for-profit organization and its resources are limited."
The House Judiciary Committee reacted to the news on X, writing, quote, "Big win for the First Amendment, big win for oversight." To which the CEO of X, Linda Yaccarino, said, quote, "No small group should be able to monopolize what gets monetized. This is an important acknowledgement and a necessary step in the right direction. I am hopeful that it means ecosystem-wide reform is coming." And the Daily Wire's Ben Shapiro also celebrated the decision, calling GARM a, quote, "censorship syndicate." Let's watch.
I testified before Congress just a few weeks ago about the Global Alliance for Responsible Media, which was effectively a censorship syndicate designed to shut down all advertising dollars to anyone on the right side of the aisle. Essentially a third-party delegated company that all these advertising agencies would go to. They would create a false standard for what was acceptable or non-acceptable material, and then they would tell advertisers that they simply should not and could not put their money with untrustworthy sources. All those untrustworthy sources were always on the right, of course.
I think this is great news. X is one of the few platforms that has allowed free speech to proliferate with massive censorship regimes from companies like Meta, shutting down conservative speech. And we know that GARM was specifically targeting conservative media outlets and conservative political commentators to try to demonetize their content so that they're not able to make a living with their posts the same way that commentators on the other side of the political aisle were. This was obviously a political hit job, and I think it's good news that Elon Musk forced them to back down.
I think that's comical given that Elon Musk has been shutting down every single demographic for Kamala Harris on Twitter over the last week, whether it was white men for Kamala Harris or Latinas for Kamala Harris, or, all these little demo groups have been shut down, not to mention other progressives who've been shadow banned on Twitter. I mean, there are plenty of shadow banned accounts, and probably including myself, to be honest, because they shut down one of my videos that I produced last year involving Puerto Rico. So, I don't think that conservatives are the ones being targeted. This is a member-based group. It has over 100 members. It's a nonprofit. Nonprofits can't be political by law as a 501c3. So I think this was a tool, using the courts as a tool against nonprofits which do not have the funding. Now, the companies have the funding. The companies could independently say, we do not want to put our brands at risk by associating with Alex Jones's account on Twitter, which is full of hate speech and conspiracy theories. Of course, these companies can independently do so. It's sad that this nonprofit, which only has 2 staffers, and is already facing legal obstacles with Jim Jordan's committee in Congress right now. And now Elon Musk is saying that he's going to go after them with RICO. It's outrageous. Elon Musk has a lot of money. He's doing whatever he can to try to get these advertisers back. But I don't think shutting down this organization is going to get the advertisers back. I think him no longer supporting hate speech online and conspiracy theorists online and giving them more sway in the algorithm, that is what is going to give its advertising revenue back.
Okay. I'll start with the question about the Kamala Harris accounts being shut down. I'm looking at White Dudes for Harris right now with a blue check mark next to it with 124,000 followers. But I'll check out those other groups you mentioned.
It was quite a few. Yeah.
Okay.
But I might have reinstated it.
I guess the fundamental question here is, what is hate speech and what is a conspiracy theory? And does engaging in your subjective interpretation of hate speech warrant being censored online? And because hate speech is a subjective category, one person's hate speech is another person's normal political speech. And we've seen in the past how normal conservative political thought, like saying that illegal immigrants who come to the country illegal should be deported, is considered hate speech by some on the left. I don't think that should be censored. That's something that the majority of Americans agree with. And we also know that in the past, we had a censorship campaign against the New York Post for running a story about Hunter Biden's laptop, which was verified by national security experts who found that this laptop was not manipulated, that it was not Russian disinformation, despite that letter from 51 intelligence assets who claimed that it was. They did not have access to any of their social media accounts prior to the 2020 election because they dared to run this story. So when you have these so-called misinformation experts applying the misinformation label to things that are factually true, that becomes a serious problem for the ability for people to have open inquiry, open debate, free speech online, which in many ways is now the public square and plays a huge role in how people get their information. X is now the #1 ranked website as to where people get their news from. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to trust the consumer to be able to determine for themselves what is true and what is false.
Trust the consumer. I mean, the algorithms are created and written by conservative-leaning white men. I mean, this is not just on X. This is also on Google. When Google
conservative-leaning white men write the algorithms on Google, that doesn't allow you to search for Trump's assassination attempt.
So when Google hired someone to come in and assess their algorithms and whether or not they're racist and sexist, guess what? She came out and said, this is a black woman who said, yes, they're racist and sexist after extensive review, and Google fired her. I mean, there are several cases. The same thing with Twitter.
I'm sure she had no incentive to say that.
Well, she provided the data and the evidence. I mean, incentive. It's called, this is the reality of how algorithms are written.
I would like to know how she
why is it that
that
conservative accounts are much more popular online? An algorithm that is written...
Because people like their content and they consume it more.
Sure, I'm sure. But 5 years ago, before the algorithms changed, they were not as popular.
That's not true.
That's 100% true.
No, you can go back to Facebook engagement back before the 2016 election and you'll see the same thing.
In 2016, progressive accounts were far more popular on Facebook and on Twitter. The algorithm switched in that year. Same thing with Google. The algorithms changed. and this has been reported on, and Twitter, by the way, also fired their accountability team that was supposed to be investigating whether or not it was hate speech. So you're saying that if you're in a newsroom, you don't want editors to decide whether or not something's true or false. It's not always going to be perfect, but Twitter is an open market of ideas, and there should be editorial oversight.
You can't say it's an open market of ideas, but then also there should be editorial oversight. If Twitter is going to act like a newspaper or a publisher, then they have to be subjected to the same regulations that newspapers are, but they're not because it is an open speech platform. That is the fundamental difference. If they're going to do political content or ideology-based moderation, then they have to be subjected to the same regulations that the FEC puts on our media outlets.
Correct.
But they're not because they don't.
That's what they're fighting over. They're saying they're this free speech platform. They're a corporation. There's no such thing as free speech in corporations, and we know that, right? This is an argument that libertarians like to make all day. Free speech based on whose terms? Elon Musk's terms? Because it's Elon Musk's decision at the end of the day who decides to be supported and who decides not to be supported. Alex Jones, who was found in a court of law as being a conspiracy theorist, is a prime example. He reinstituted Alex Jones after he was convicted. So for using the law as this metric, then here's a prime example of somebody who is part of this conspiratorial hate-mongering machine being propped up on Twitter just because Elon Musk allowed for that to happen. And White Dudes for Twitter has twice been taken down on Twitter, X, excuse me, I keep saying Twitter, and maybe they reinstituted after the bad press, but he's already taking him down twice.
Yeah, and I think we would have to look at why they were taken down because, of course, when people violate the terms of service that are on X, then they get removed. And if after a review it was found that they didn't violate the terms of service, then they should be reinstated. And that's a classic part of platform management. But you say that it's all up to what Elon Musk decides. But you're saying that you want hate speech removed from X. So, I mean, do you get to decide? I mean, that's exactly the problem is when we go beyond terms of service and start trying to do content-based moderation based on what we deem to be hate speech or conspiracy theories. In the past, there's been so many cases where people have got that wrong. Who is going to be in charge of determining whether or not something is hateful or a conspiracy theory?
Right now, no one's in charge except for Elon Musk. He's fired most of the team that was assessing
right,
whether
but
or not something was
is
truthful
that
or true or false, hate or not hate. I mean, these aren't hard things. When someone says something violently against you on Twitter, that's hate speech. When someone
there are terms of service that say that you cannot make threats of violence, right?
Exactly.
So there's a difference between inciting or threatening violence and saying something that you think is hateful.
It's not about what I think. It is having people on a team that are able to assess this. Right now, Twitter is empty. He got rid of tons of his staff, the people who are in charge of overseeing this. If you file a complaint, I mean, how many times I've reported people who've said nasty things against me, threatened my life, and I'll probably get it today, and nothing has happened because there's nobody on Team X right now overseeing this except for Elon Musk. I literally posted a video last year. It was an investigative video about a cryptocurrency entrepreneur in Puerto Rico. That guy called Elon Musk personally to have the video taken down. Do you not see the problem with this?
No, I agree. That would be a problem if that case happened. I agree with that. But I don't see a broader problem with the idea that Elon Musk should err on the side of allowing free speech, even if certain people might deem some content hateful. If it's not directly threatening violence or inciting violence, then I think we should err on the side of allowing information to flow on X. Because, again, there have been people within the U.S. government, no less, who have claimed to be misinformation experts or disinformation experts, who have made the wrong call repeatedly on stories of great significance. I mean, the Hunter Biden laptop story is the perfect example of this. They claimed that was disinformation. It was not. Every mainstream media outlet at this point has confirmed that it was real, and now there are active court cases involving Hunter Biden because of that. So if we're going to say, well, we need to police what's true and false on social media, you start to get into very dangerous territory, especially since we do have a First Amendment in this country. People have a right to free speech. free speech.
You have a right to free speech, but not within a corporation. So either they're a news publication or they're not. Either they're a corporation or they're not. I mean, right now, there is no free speech on Twitter. So if we're going to debate that, we can have a real conversation about who's getting banned and who's not, and based on what terms. Right now, there are no standards. So yes, there are terms and policies, but if we want to have a set of standards, then we have to define what is hate speech. Because right now, there's no definition of any of this, and everything's running amok. There are fake accounts. There's bots. I mean, does a bot have the same right as you and I do?
Well, there's
not in free speech land.
You said that there's no definition of hate speech, and there never will be one that people agree on because it is fundamentally a subjective idea.
Well, but I would challenge about an editor in a newsroom.
But Twitter's not a newsroom, so I would challenge you to, if you have a definition of hate speech that you prefer, to share it now, so that we can actually get to the bottom of what it is that you want X to be doing in terms of content moderation.
Okay, it's not up for me to decide. That's the whole point, is that we need people, a team.
But who does it then? Like literally who? Because if it's not you, if it's not Elon Musk, then who gets to decide what's allowed on X?
They used to have staff, they used to have editorial advisors.
Company. Elon Musk owns the company, so actually he does get to decide.
He does, that's what I'm saying, but you can't say free speech. But here's the thing, you want it both ways. You want Elon Musk to be the decider.
I want a free speech on X.
You want Elon Musk to decide everything, but you also want to say free speech. Well, he doesn't, if it's free speech and Elon Musk is the one deciding what speech is real, and meanwhile, let's not forget how many fake accounts are on there.
He's limiting the terms of service to things that are against law, right? Because he's trying to promote a culture of free speech on the platform. Yes, obviously Twitter is not under the jurisdiction of the First Amendment. We all know that. We know how the Constitution works. But he is erring on the side of, I am not going to make ideological decisions on what content is allowed on this platform because I want to give people the opportunity to decide for themselves what they think is true and what they think is false. I'm not going to police it a la YouTube or Meta, where they say, oh, you're not allowed to talk about vaccine harm, or you're not allowed to say that people can still get COVID if they have the vaccine because the scientific experts and the disinformation experts all said that was false. And then surprise, 3 months later, we were all vindicated because it turned out all of those things were true.
I mean, I think they're focusing more on, for instance, terrorism. I mean, there are accounts that are pushing terrorism on Twitter still. Adam McKay gets shut down. His Twitter account gets shut down last week. But we have plenty of far-right hate mongers. You have terrorist accounts. You have bots. How many bots are still on Twitter? And yet you have real people who have ideas, who want to have debate, and still don't know why their accounts were shut down. Adam McKay in this particular instance. So if you're going to have a set of standards, then it has to be equal for all people. It means the platform needs to be equal.
That's exactly my point.
So make the algorithms transparent, make them equal, get rid of the bots because they're not, real people. Make sure that there are no troll farms. If there is actual threats, which are happening every day, every second on Twitter, then you should shut down those accounts as well.
I completely agree. And what I'm saying here is that there's a fundamental problem where you can criticize Elon Musk for, individual decisions that X has made in terms of content moderation. Mm-hmm. But to say that this nonprofit group that is going around and specifically singling out the Daily Wire, Fox News, Breitbart News, Judiciary, GOP, Ben Shapiro, et cetera, and saying that they shouldn't be allowed on the platform. And if they are, we're going to actually give a financial disincentive for X to remove them. I find that to be problematic.
No, they flag those accounts for their members who are major corporations, and the corporations can still make a decision whether or not they want to advertise or not. There's 100 members. Unilever, you don't think Unilever can disassociate and say, in this situation, yes, we'll continue to support Ben Shapiro?
They can, but then they're going to catch the ire of the GARM and all of the people who follow it, who are going to accuse them of being Nazis and supporting hateful content.
Well, maybe Ben Shapiro should be more thoughtful about his ideas and his opinions and whether or not they hurt or impact people or it's misinformation.
But that doesn't mean that he should be censored, if you think that about
No one's censoring him. It's Elon Musk's platform. It means that Elon Musk doesn't get to make money off of his opinions from those specific members.
All right. We're going to have to leave it there. We'll be back with more Rising after this. An unearthed picture of Donald Trump and Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation and leader of Project 2025, is making the rounds on social media. Trump said that he does not know who is behind Project 2025, although this photo from 2022 shows him together with Kevin Roberts.
This photo conflicts with Trump's insistence that he knows very little about Project 2025, a policy blueprint for the next GOP administration. For weeks, Trump has attempted to distance himself from the plan, but Democrats are continuing to link the GOP nominee to it. According to a New University of Massachusetts Amherst poll, Project 2025 is deeply unpopular. The poll found that 53% of Americans, 2/3 of whom are Democrats, indicated that they had read, seen, or heard at least something about the project, and they aren't keen on it. Roberts, now the head of Project 2025, announced that the release date for his forthcoming book, called Dawn's Early Light: Taking Back Washington to Save America, which includes details about the plan, has been pushed back till after the November election. I mean, this is wild. Okay. Over 140 former Trump administration officials helped draft Project 2025. The fact that Donald Trump is somehow trying to pretend that he had no relationship with Kevin Roberts and the Heritage Foundation. I mean, the Heritage Foundation is a key part of the Republican Party's ideological, backing. Would you not say that? And the fact that they were on the plane together. And Kevin Roberts already said that he had a good relationship and had briefed Donald Trump on Project 2025.
Yeah, I think they're friends, but I would say that the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025 in particular, at least from an economic perspective, has a lot of divorced ideas from the Trump campaign. And I also know that Trump has his own agenda, which is Agenda 47, which you can look at if you want to know what his policies are. I know Kamala Harris doesn't have any of those on her website yet. But I think all of this, obsession with Project 2025 is really overblown. It's pretty standard for think tanks to prepare materials for an incoming administration that they hope they're going to use. That doesn't mean that Trump is obligated or mandated to accept any of them. Doesn't mean that he was personally involved in it. I mean, I think we could look at the Center for American Progress as a key foil on the left, right? There are a lot of people who have funneled in and out of the Biden administration who have gone on to work for liberal think tanks, and I think it's the same thing here.
I mean, Cap, fair enough, but Cap also was very involved in the policy decisions that are made on the platform committee, and they're a part of the platform committee. We're more democratic. There are union members in the platform committee. There are
very democratic to push
leaders
out the nominee who received 14 million votes for someone who didn't receive any.
Well, Kamala Harris was on the ticket, so she did receive those votes as well, and she campaigned with President Biden on that ticket. So, she did run around the country, give speeches, and do debates, and she was part of the ticket that won President Biden the nomination. But with that being said, we do have a platform committee coming up. And how the platforms are played out in the Democratic Party, it's messy. I'm not saying that the administration will stay to that platform. I wish that the administration would, because the last platform was the most progressive platform in the Democratic Party's history. The Republicans, on the other hand, these are 140 former members of the Trump administration were part of drafting Project 2025. You don't think that they go hand in hand?
Well, I know who was involved in the platform committee at the Republican National Convention, and it was Trump's team. It wasn't people from the Heritage Foundation.
But Trump's team, 140 former members.
Former people who worked in his administration,
Yes.
not people who are currently on the campaign.
Well, it's kind of mysterious who's on the campaign because there's so many people coming in and out, and obviously the two campaign managers are not really in Donald Trump's ear, and he's going on stage just saying whatever he wants to say. J.D. Vance wrote the foreword for this book, Kevin Roberts' book. J.D. Vance, of course, is leaning in on his populist messaging. So I'm confused. Is the Heritage Foundation book, Project 2025, populist, or is it not? Because child labor standards, for instance, in this are pretty abysmal. The fact
and that's why I'm saying that there is daylight between the two, because I don't think the Heritage Foundation is as economically populist as J.D. Vance is, and historically hasn't been. It historically has been a more free market maximizing place, and that has been one of the criticisms of the Republican Party from Trump's base, is that they for a long time have said that, corporate tax cuts or offshoring manufacturing to get cheaper labor is more important than making sure that American workers are protected. And that's something that the Trump-Vance campaign has been talking about and has been very critical of. Trump, of course, one of his biggest issues in 2015 was talking about the fact that the U.S. is so involved in regime change wars, that we don't use the power of tariffs to make sure that American manufacturing is protected, that we don't build things in this country anymore. People aren't able to get stable, high-wage employment. So, yeah, I don't find this Project 2025 thing to be at all consistent with what the Trump campaign is talking about or would do if he were elected to office. I think Agenda 47 is very clear on his website, and his campaign I don't think is mysterious at all. We know who's on the campaign. They all have it in their Twitter bios. But yeah, I think J.D. Vance and Kevin Roberts are friends, just like a lot of people in the conservative movement. Surprise, surprise, there's not a lot of us in D.C. We all do know each other, and we all treat each other with respect and sometimes do favors for each other. That doesn't mean that we agree on every single issue.
I mean, writing a foreword to a book, and obviously it's definitely...
And we don't know what's in the book.
It's impacting the race in that he has decided to not publish until after the election, which shows, I mean, this goes to the point. Who is J.D. Vance? You know, he used to be an anti-Trump guy. Then he was a libertarian. He's backed by Peter Thiel, and now he's a populist. But he was also a tech executive. He was criticizing Silicon Valley, but he worked in Silicon Valley as a VC. I mean, we don't really know who this guy is at the end of the day. And that's not great for the Trump campaign, because here you are talking about another platform, Agenda 47, when there's
It's not another platform, it's his platform. And I don't think it's hard to know who J.D. Vance is, because he has a literal book about his upbringing and has explained in very thorough detail why he changed his mind on former President Donald Trump. And I don't think the same could be said of Kamala Harris, who has yet to explain why she has shifted so dramatically from policy positions during the Democratic primary in 2019 to where she stands today.
But I thought you said you didn't know where she stands today, so how do you know she shifted?
Well, it's a good point. She doesn't have a policy platform, but based on what we know that her aides are feeding to the media, she's trying to make some kind of run to the center, because her campaign aides have said to the media that she no longer supports banning fracking. She now claims that she's going to secure the border when her administration had 3.5 years to do it and completely failed.
Guess what? Immigration is down over the border right now.
It's still above, significantly above, the highest month that Trump experienced, which was in May of 2019.
Do you think that has anything to do with maybe Donald Trump's policies when it comes to Latin America? Do you think it has anything to do with that at all, especially given Venezuela and oil? I mean, the reliance that Trump had, Putin has in particular with his relationship with Venezuela. I mean, these are key factors as to why there is border instability. I mean, there's also, CBS reported that the majority of those coming over the border right now are actually Chinese immigrants. I mean, we could go on and on about why the border is the way it is. But to say that there is no security at the border right now in comparison to Donald Trump, yeah, you know what? Joe Biden isn't putting kids in cages and making money off of it. I mean, there were contractors at the...
It was when he was vice president for Barack Obama that they started putting kids in cages.
There were no contractors that were tied to the administration making money off of separating children at the border.
Health and Human Services put kids in cages during the Obama administration as early
separate children.
As 2014. Actually, they did. And you can listen to DHS Secretary Jay Johnson, who admitted to that fact.
Were there contractors in the Obama-Biden administration making money off of building the cages as there were in the Trump administration?
I don't know who was making money off of it. I'm sure that somebody was. He'd be hard-pressed to find just about anything that wasn't government contracted, but we do know that the Obama administration did, in fact, separate kids from their families.
Not at the rate that, and it was not in the policy level. I mean, it was not a plan orchestrated internally.
It wasn't
by Stephen Miller. I mean, Stephen Miller's life mission is to separate people at the border.
Okay, that's not true. So the policy that was under Trump was not a family separation policy. I understand that's the way it was sold in the media. The policy was that every single person who crosses the border illegally is going to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law and be removed from the country. There was a zero tolerance policy for illegal crossings. Unfortunately, under Bill Clinton, there was a Flores settlement, the Flores Agreement, which said that you cannot hold families together for more than 72 hours because you want to protect children from the potential of being abused by adults. So if children were held in not captivity, but if they were held in the HHS facilities for longer than 72 hours, they had to be separated from their families because they did not want a bunch of grown men around young children in these facilities. That was the crux of the Flores settlement.
This is what Republicans do so well, and this is what Stephen Miller does so so well. He
Explain
finds
the policy.
loopholes. No, he finds loopholes in the law and uses them as his weapon to keep these families apart. But again, let's go back to Project
the Trump
2025.
administration tried to end the Flores agreement, right?
Let's
so that
go back to Project
hold them
2025.
separately?
Project 2025.
Because you don't want to talk about the fact that you're
No,
wrong
I just
about
think that
family
we're getting off
separation.
topic here, and I think this is the problem right now with the Trump campaign is that they don't know what they stand for. You have J.D. Vance, who is running on one thing, who has a history in another area, is attacking, saying that Tim Walz is a San Francisco liberal. Tim Walz didn't even go to San Francisco for the first time until literally last week. Tim Walz went to San Francisco for the first time in his entire life, whereas J.D. Vance actually worked in San Francisco, made money in the tech sector as a VC, is nowhere near his hillbilly elegy working class background. He went to Ivy League schools, and he's getting backed by Peter Thiel, who is the biggest libertarian on the planet. So I don't understand how you can be backed by libertarians, have a libertarian background, and somehow be a populist at the same time. And that's why I think it's confusing when you have Agenda 47 and Project 2025. The American people don't know what you stand for. And if you have to explain, you're losing.
Right. It's not confusing. The reason that people are confused is because the left continues to lie about the fact that Project 2025 is Trump's agenda when he has his own policy platform on his website. And if your contention is that J.D. Vance is going to govern like a libertarian because he sometimes receives backing from libertarians, I guess I would ask you, does that mean that Tim Walz is an anti-Semite because he had a Muslim cleric show up 5 times?
I'm sorry, what?
Let me finish. Let me ask you the
Walz
question.
isn't accepting millions and millions of dollars from Peter Thiel.
Can I ask the question? Okay, so 5 times when he was in the governor's mansion in Minnesota, he invited a Muslim cleric who celebrated the October 7th attacks on Israel by Hamas and showed regular screenings of a pro-Hitler film to the members of his organization. So if it's guilt by association, then you have to hold the same standard that you just held J.D. Vance to.
He's taking money from Peter Thiel.
And he had this guy in the governor's mansion. So what's the difference?
I'm sorry, I'm on stage with you right now. Are you a Bernie Sanders supporter because you're sitting next to me having a conversation?
That's exactly my point. You're
no. Taking money from somebody. No.
And so the left
J.D.
never
Vance's
takes
career was supported by Peter Thiel.
And the left never takes money from people that they don't agree with on every single issue.
Peter Thiel has given more money to J.D. Vance than anybody you could get that comment about by $27 donations of Bernie Sanders.
And guess what? J.D. Vance is a senator right now. You can look at his record and see that he has not governed as a libertarian. And one final point for you on how he has abandoned his hillbilly roots. I will tell you, I'm a hillbilly, okay? I grew up with working class parents. My mom was a homemaker. My dad was a plumber. I went to Georgetown. And you know what? I carry a lot of guilt about the fact that I left my community behind and that I went to an elite college and that I do really well for myself. That's not an easy thing, not an easy burden to carry. So I think anyone who would actually criticize J.D. Vance for doing well for himself and yet still tries to give back to the people that he left behind and create policy that creates better opportunities for them so that they can do the same thing he did, I think that's a disgusting attack.
Well, I don't think that's what's happening. He was a venture capitalist, and venture capitalists are not sitting there supporting working people. If he was doing that, then he'd give back and go back to his community, become a social worker, do things on the ground with working people, but instead he's exploiting working people, and he's using the story of working people, having also grown up in the Rust Belt, Buffalo, New York, in a rural community. I can tell you, you can make a choice in life. You either go and you support the working people on the ground or you exploit them, and he's used their stories as his stories. He's made a movie and a blockbuster book about this, and then he went to San Francisco and made a ton of money in the venture capital world. Tim Walz has never made over $175,000 a year. He collects 4
government pensions.
Which
where do you think they're invested in? What do you think they're invested in? Right.
Government pensions are a dream. I think everybody should have a right to have one.
Yeah, and they're invested in the stock market that you accuse J.D. Vance of using to manipulate working class people. We're going to be back with more Rising after this. Taylor Swift is making news because there was a foiled terror plot in Vienna, Austria, which forced authorities to cancel her Eras Tour performances there. Law enforcement officials just announced a 3rd arrest of an Iraqi citizen who was allegedly part of the terror plot. According to Barracuda Music, the concert promoter, Swift was scheduled to play 3 shows in Vienna, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, but all have been canceled. It's a bust for businesses and a blow to fans and raises a lot of questions about national security. Their production company said tickets will be automatically refunded. A crowd of fans gathered in a square in Vienna Thursday and broke out in song, singing Swift's hits as their dreams of seeing her play live were dashed. 3 suspects have been taken into custody in connection with the foiled plot. 2 of whom are Austrian citizens, and the other is an Iraqi citizen. Meanwhile, Taylor Swift endorse Kamala Harris? The mega star has yet to make a public endorsement, but fans think an Instagram post from 2 days ago on Swift's account contained a silhouette eerily similar to Kamala Harris as a telltale sign. As many are left speculating, several reports are debunking this, saying that the image isn't meant to be Harris, but rather is a backup dancer. Interesting.
Sure.
I don't think Taylor Swift does anything by accident at this point. It does look eerily like Kamala Harris, and I've seen some of her past posts from concerts, and she doesn't typically allow just one solo backup dancer silhouette in the back. So I obviously, it wouldn't be surprising to anybody for her to either indirectly or directly endorse Kamala Harris. She has endorsed Democratic candidates in the past. She's obviously not a conservative or a Republican, so probably not big news, although there are probably a lot of young Swifties out there who would follow her lead if she did endorse. But I think the bigger story here is obviously this attempted terror attack. Eerily similar, I think, to the Manchester bombing of Ariana Grande's concert. These suspected terrorists, 3 of whom were apparently actually involved in the security team for the concerts. They wanted to drive explosives into the venue and then had knives and other weapons to attack the concert goers. Obviously a terrifying situation, and a lot of gratitude that this was caught before it could be carried out.
Yeah, the U.S. intelligence alerted authorities there, and of course the authorities were able to stop this, and it's very sad, obviously, for so many different Swifties out there, many of whom come from the United States, because the tickets are just so much cheaper to even fly there, stay in a different city, be tourists there. It's very sad, especially because a lot of them are younger. It's a big trip, it's a big event. With that being said, I think this is horrifying. I mean, one of the members of this group, group of 3, wanted to plow into the crowd on the outside and then also attack from the inside. But what's being reported is that in one of the Austrian citizen, the native Austrian, his home, he had machetes. Let me go through everything. He had machetes, knives, explosives, steroids, 21,000 euros in counterfeit euros, fabricated bombs. He had no ticket to the conference. He had a police siren system so that he would be able to drive in unstopped. Where were his parents? How do you not know, if you're living in your parents' home, that your child is creating bombs and has this much material in their house? This is incredibly alarming, and it's a throwback to about a decade ago when ISIS was carrying out more attacks, especially in Western countries. Thank God that it was stopped, thwarted, so we didn't have another tragedy. But Taylor Swift this is a political act, but also Taylor Swift in the post that she made, just to keep it a little bit more light for a second. She is incredibly powerful, and she can move so many young people who may not be as activated to go to the polls or haven't been in the past. She, of course, encouraged young people to register to vote without even endorsing someone last cycle. And so hopefully, she'll come out and she will make an endorsement. But if not, just ask people to vote. I think that's enough right there to make a difference.
Sure. This is obviously a very concerning indication that ISIS is not defeated. In fact, they're probably just splintered at this point in various cells around both Europe and the Middle East. They're particularly prominent now in Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan, but have inspired radicalism among people throughout Europe. And it appears that's how these individuals came together, was that they had pledged allegiance to the Islamic State. One of the Austrian natives, his parents are, I believe, refugees. And unfortunately, we've seen how sometimes just statistically second-generation immigrants are more likely to be radicalized with terror groups for whatever reason that may be. And it appears that that might be what has happened here, in combination with this Iraqi citizen who also swore allegiance to the Islamic State. These homegrown terrorists, as we describe them, have seemingly become more prominent and pose a great risk to the free world.
I agree. It's another reason why we have to be more on top of what's happening in social media. They were radicalized on social media. They were watching ISIS videos, recruitment videos, and of course they prey on young boys in particular.
Gosh. Yeah, it's really terrifying to think that, you could just go to a concert, try to exercise your freedom to
have fun,
do something fun. Right. Maybe you go with your family, you go with your friends. And I know some people actually won't even go to the movies anymore because they're concerned about potential attacks there. And people will sometimes change their behavior because of this. I don't want to politicize this segment too much because obviously we're just grateful that this didn't happen. But I do think that this kind of underscores some of the threat that we've been facing through our own southern border. We have seen 99 suspected terrorists released into the United States. I mean, it's not, oh, come on, though. This is a fact. There were 8 terrorists with suspected ties to ISIS who were caught within the interior of the United States.
And we have absolutely, ISIS and they will find a way however they can, okay? These were homegrown terrorists. They didn't go over the border. This was an Austrian-born citizen of Northern Macedonian descent, and that's not necessarily a refugee. Northern Macedonia isn't a place where war is taking place right now. That was the guy who had all of his ammunition in his parents' basement. That was the one who wanted to crash through the concert. I mean, if you're going to cherry pick and make it it is a political statement what you're making right now. This is about U.S. intelligence was able to share their intelligence, as they did with Russia, with the attack that occurred in Russia just a few months ago, and Russia decided not to take the United States' warning about the attack that was going to take place. I mean, this is our intelligence being strong, and thank goodness we're sharing information with other countries, even adversaries, foreign adversaries. For us to be able to defeat, quote unquote, terrorism and to stop these events from happening, we have to be in communication with each other, and we have to work with each other. The U.S. border is the U.S. border. The Canadian border has had the same issues.
That's true.
All borders have these issues.
It's not
that
just
is
the
not.
border.
But terrorism is not solely an issue of borders. I mean,
no, it's
as
not,
you said,
but
this
it's
Northern Macedonian second generation, he was homegrown. I mean, this can happen anywhere. We have domestic terrorism in this country.
I'm not disagreeing with you that obviously not all terrorists come across the border and create cells within a country. But I do think that if we have a potential way to stop them from coming to the United States, then that method should be exercised.
We catch them at the border. We
haven't been catching them at the border. In fact,
we did because we found out about them and stopped them.
After they had already been here for years. After they'd already been here for years. And there's also a report that the Department of Homeland Security had released a report that there were 99 terrorists, suspected terrorists, who were stopped at the southern border, processed, and then released into the United States. So I do think we have to ask questions about why our processing is not stopping these individuals from getting into our country. I think that's a legitimate question when we're seeing the rise of ISIS around the world.
And I think that we should be taking on these tech companies to prevent this radicalization from happening. I mean, there are accounts that are on YouTube right now that are radicalizing boys all over the world. We should be talking about that too, taking on big tech.
Sure.
We should be talking about getting guns out of the hands of young people in this country, because terrorism happens every day with school shootings and shootings across this country, especially when those guns aren't registered and with background checks. I mean, there are so many ways that we could combat terrorism and what we define as terrorism. But about this instance in particular, this is a concern because these boys are radicalized and they're taking on a concert of young women. I don't know what they're standing for and what ISIS wants them to do, but it's, deeply disconcerting. And, Taylor Swift concert goers, any concert goers should be able to go out there and have fun without risking, their own lives.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Everybody should be able to do that. It's a shame that this was even attempted, and thank God that they stopped it before it could happen.
Yep.
That's going to do it for us this week on Rising. It was great to be back with you at the desk today, Naomi. Absolutely. All right. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. Thanks. We'll see you next week.